A lot of people ask me what sample libraries I actually use on a regular basis, and while my template is relatively minimal, I decided to kind of go through my patches, my libraries, and really drill down to the 10 most common libraries that I use on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, let's kind of jump on in, and if you want to check out my full composing workflow and orchestration workflow at any point, you can access my free workshop down below in the description box, and I'll walk you through step-by-step how I go from initial idea all the way to the polished final master, just so you can see my whole workflow uncovered. Okay, so with that being said, let's kind of jump into Logic and I'll show you my libraries. All right, so in terms of the pianos that I use, the one that I use 90% of the time is still CinePiano from Cinesamples. And the bulk of my template, or the bulk of the libraries I actually use, are Cinesamples and Cinematic Studio Series, as you'll see in a moment. So let me quickly show you here. CinePiano has 4 patches: the classic CinePiano patch, classical, cinematic, and Rock Studio Grand. So let me just play the CinePiano patch here for you, just so you can hear it, and then we'll move on to the next library. So aside from its really clear, beautiful, detailed sound, one other reason I really like it is because you can choose to have the velocity curve adjusted to bias more forte, so like louder performances, or softer performances. So I like to put this on bias piano a lot of the time because a lot of the performances I use, or this patch for, are due to the softer nature of the keys. So right, it really focuses on those softer dynamic layers of the piano, and I'm basically playing with the same pressure as I did at the beginning. So it's just a really nice way to get a sort of a softer, more intimate sound from that piano just by clicking that button there. But of course, you can adjust the velocity curve yourself however you like. All right, moving on to the second library I use every single day, that is CSS. And so let me just show you the violins here, but I basically have all the Cinematic Studio stuff, even the piano, but this is the first violins. So for me, the biggest draw of this library are 2 things. Number one is the sound itself. It's just very passionate. It's very romantic in a way. And when you play out of the box, it just has this very characteristic sort of performance. And it sounds realistic to me. You know, that's a big thing for me. The other thing is that the legato is very smooth and very playable. So this is one of those libraries where you don't really have to tweak anything to get the performance out up and going. You can always edit and post, of course, but when it comes to actually just playing out your ideas, the Cinematic Studio Series is very well programmed and allows you to do that. And I just like how the patch structure here in the library is so simple. They basically give you 1 patch per section, and then you got a light ensemble and full ensemble in case you want to do some sketching there as well. But all the articulations are within the one patch, and then depending on your velocity, that changes the legato speed, and you can choose advanced or standard legato, concertino emulation if you want as well, and then some basic mic positions there, as well as an onboard reverb. So it gives you the workhorse articulations and the stuff you would need to get up and running pretty quickly. Similarly, CSSS, or Cinematic Studio Solo Strings, is really good for my solo string writing as well, and these are meant more as more of an ensemble sort of context when we're talking about these solo strings, not really as 100% standalone strings, although you could sort of get away with it. But I feel like these libraries complement CSS really well in terms of layering, or maybe even doing a sort of quartet with a background with CSS. So let me just play the viola for you here. This is my favorite instrument from this library. right? So the legato is smooth just like CSS. The crossfades are obviously a little bit more difficult, and they're easier for us to detect as a listener because it's one solo string. So when you have that sample of the legato transition crossfading into the regular sustain sample, it's a little bit more obvious and audible. So it's not perfect, of course, but for an ensemble context, it gets the job done for me really, really well. Now, I think Cinematic Studio Woodwinds is really special. It's my main woodwind library for my woodwinds. It used to be Berlin woodwinds, but I just found it took up a lot of CPU storage and processing power. But I also like CSW because it works so well with the strings as well, right? The workflow is very similar, the sound quality is very similar, and the legato is very buttery as well. So it comes with all these different workhorse instruments, some doublers as well, and then the ensembles with 2 instruments of each. So this is what the flute sounds like. And there on that very last note, you could hear some crossfading there, and that's because I was running the mod wheel going from the mezzo forte dynamic down to like the piano one. So naturally, because it's a solo instrument, it's going to be a lot more exposed when we do that crossfade. But all things considered, I think it's a very dynamic library, and the legato is just as playable as the strings. All right, then for brass, I usually use CineBrass. So CSB, I also like Cinematic Studio Brass, but the sound is just a tad too dark for me, and I like the presence and the overall sound, the recording quality of CineBrass from Cinesamples. So we have Core and Pro, but typically for most purposes, I'll stick with Core. So the articulations patch basically comes with 3 types of shorts. We have a very short staccatissimo, we have a regular staccato, and then more of a tenuto or marcato. And then if you press down the sustain pedal, you get the legato. So let me just play the shorts for you first, and then we'll hear some legato with the sustain pedal down. Right, so even though the legato programming isn't the absolute best and it doesn't really hold up to today's standards, I still like to use it occasionally in the context of a mix. But yeah, those shorts, you can hear how the notes resonate in the hull in a really beautiful way. The MGM scoring stage just suits brass so well, and that's a staple of why like composers nowadays still enjoy the CineBrass libraries. But a lot of them do say like, I wish the programming was updated, it had a facelift, and I believe with Musio now, the CineBrass libraries are in there now or are going to be in there now. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. And I've done a video on Musio as well if you want to check that out. Basically, it's their subscription service where you can access all the Cinesamples libraries and more all in one player. And you don't have to download the entire library. You can just download the one patch you're looking for from a specific library. Okay, for percussion, I always use CinePerc first. Very, very comprehensive. This is the core section of the library, but it actually has 4 folders. So we have the core section, but there's also the pro section. There's also, let's take a look actually. Let me go back. Orchestral perc, yeah. So like this is how they updated, or they have the folder structure for the new version of CinePerc. But if we go into legacy, these are sort of the 4 folders that they originally packaged it in. So core, pro, epic, and auxiliary. Let's just hear the timpani here. right? So beautiful sound. So yeah, for orchestral percussion, like standard acoustic percussion, I will go with CinePerc. But for something a little bit more heavy hitting that has a bit more processing in it, I do really enjoy Damage 2 from Heaviosity. So I believe this is library number 8, or no, this is library number 7 that I use nearly every day. And yeah, it just gives me a little bit of extra punch that I don't really get from CinePerc on its own. So let me just quickly show you here. This is what this patch sounds like. And this one particular has sort of the mid, taikos, rims, all that stuff mapped to these keys here. Right, so that's out of the box, and it definitely has a meatier, fuller, punchier sound compared to just the standard orchestral percussion. But yeah, this is sort of the follow-up to the original Damage, which also had really heavy-hitting percussion, but this one's a little bit more acoustic in nature. So that's it for percussion, pretty much. And then library number 8 for harp, I tend to go with CineHarps 99% of the time. So yeah, I just like the recording quality, overall the detail of the sound, and this harp is quite present as well. So it allows itself to be heard quite well. But of course, if you want to push back in the mix, you certainly can adjust the mic positions and choose one of these mixer presets as well to help you do that really quickly. All right, almost there. And then for choir, because I use voices a lot in my music as well, I tend to use them a lot for pads or ethereal backgrounds. So Time Macro actually has a beautiful choir from Orchestral Tools, as you can see here. I just use the mixed choir, and in this case, I'm using the OO patches. So it sounds like this. Yeah, that's as close as it gets to like ethereal, heavenly vocals, you know, just so beautiful. And it's really cool because the Time series from OT, they're meant as like really textural, sort of like almost sound design patches based on the orchestra. But it's nice to have these sort of workhorse patches that don't have additional articulations and like, you know, weird syllables that they're using. It's just nice to have an ah and an oo patch just to kick things off. And then finally, for additional decoration, I love Hollywoodwinds, and this is a library that's been around forever, I think since 2009. So it's an oldie, but definitely a goodie, and it's just so unique as well. So one of my favorite patches is the Scales patch. You can play it in any key you want. So that's C major. You can change keys, E major, G major, A flat major, right? And then they not only give you major scales up 2 octaves, you can go up 1 octave, down 2 octaves, down 1 octave, up and down 2 octaves. And then that's from tonic to tonic. They also give you from dominant to dominant. So the 5th of the scale up to the 5th of the scale. Right? And then 1 octave, 2 octaves down, 1 octave down, and then 2 octaves up and down. So very, very cool. And then they actually follow that up with CineStrings Runs, which does something very similar, but basically just for the violin section. So this was definitely a library that was in demand, I would say, and definitely needed in the market at the time, because it's like you could always create your own woodwind runs from fast legato sort of patches in the woodwinds, but nothing is ever going to sound as realistic or as natural as if you actually use real performances from these musicians. And so that's one reason I love this, is because if I want that texture, it's very easy for me to just pull up this patch, play a pre-recorded run, and my job is done. So Yeah, really enjoy that. But yeah, hopefully that made sense. And again, that just gives you a look at, you know, my 10 libraries that I use on a regular basis, basically one for each section for each instrument that I use. So piano, strings, winds, brass, and then, you know, other percussion, harps, vocals, stuff like that. And let me know down below if you use any of these libraries. If you followed me for any length of time, I don't think any of these libraries should come as a surprise. I've talked about all of these at some point, but I just wanted to consolidate them all in this one video and kind of share them with you one at a time. But yeah, again, if you want to check out like my full start to finish workflow of how I actually write music from start to finish, I'd love to give you access to my free workshop down below in the description. And it's basically a 45-minute workshop detailing the step-by-step process I go through to go from the initial idea all the way to the polished final master. And along the way, I'll also share with you my virtual orchestration roadmap so you know how I approach my mockups every single time I work on a piece of music. With that being said, if you want to go even further on your musical journey, you want to watch another video from this channel and just continue to hone your musical skills, then you can click this video right here and check that out, and I'll catch you there in that video. I'll see you in the next one.